ជំរាបសួរពីប្រទេសកម្ពុជា Good mornings and good afternoons. Today, welcome today our webinars. Today webinar is one of the three series of webinars being sponsored by the program Build4People. And today is the last seminar in the series that the Center of My Studies co-hosts to share the urban insights to the audience. Today's seminars we will focus on time for the change, and we will look at the role of environmental psychologists in promoting sustainable urban programs. Before we start, I also would like to introduce myself. My name is Thuon. I am a lecturer at the Royal University of Phnom Penh. I also working as the newly established program as a program coordinator for urban sustainable planning and development. And I also taught a series of courses related to urban climate resilience, introduction to sociology, and the series to social science humanities at different level at the university. Center of My Study is one of the research center that promotes teachings, learnings, and research engagements to the subject of humanities, social science, social engagements in Cambodia and also in the country in the Mekong regions. Our today's seminar we will have four speakers that are going to share our discussion today. The first speaker I wish to introduce Ms. Alena Baker. She is also the research associate from the Division of Environmental Psychology at the University of Magdeburg, and she also has joined the program called Build4People since 2019. And the second one, I also would like to introduce Dr. Anke's Blueburn. Excuse me if I do something wrong, spell wrong. And she is the senior researcher at the Institute of Psychology at the Otto von Guericke University of Magdeburg. And she also the leading group on the package called the behavior change of the Build4People. And Anke also the mediators according to the guideline of the Federation Association of Mediation in the Germany. And the third presenters, I wish to introduce Dr. Samuel Jones. He is the research fellows and head of the urban psychology lab in the Lee Kuan Yew Center for the innovative cities at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. He is an applied social psychologist, and his research focus on human behavior, decision in the city across a range of areas, including mobility, sustainability, and well-being, human adaptabilities, and resilience. His work also multidisciplinary and applied in nature, focus on delivering practical and policy impact. And the last speakers is our Cambodian urban scholars, Dr. Pothiruat Chan, and he is currently the laureate at the Korean Foundation for the Advanced Study called J, and the National Coordinator for Sustainable Development Goals, financing strategy development in Cambodia. And he has more than a 10-year experience working as the coordinators, consultants, a senior technical officer, researcher for various sustainable development and sustainable development goal related projects, and has been based in the Department of Green Economy, National Council for Sustainable Development of the Ministry of Environment. And he holds a PhD in Sustainable Urban and Regional Development from Penyang University Seoul campus, and graduate diploma from the Agro Study International Center from Israel. So welcome to our speaker. And to start with, I will leave the floor to Dr. Anke Bluebers to start the first presentation and introduction to your team. And our session today, we will process straight key presentations from the first to the final, and then we will provide a floor for discussion from the audience. So now I would turn the floor to Dr. Anke, so you can introduce more about yourself and your project, and also your colleague before you start presentation. Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Thuon, thank you so much for your kind introduction and for facilitating our webinar today. And I would now also like to thank Ms. Samedy Soung from the Center of Khmer Studies and her team for the brilliant organization of this webinar. And also from my side, a warm welcome to all the participants we can't see, but we are happy that you are participating with us today. And to our speakers, Dr. Samedy Soung from Singapore and Dr. Buttiarat Chan from the Korean Foundation for Advanced Studies. And as you already heard, probably that we, my colleague Annalena Becker and I, we are part of a bigger project, the Build4People project, and we are both environmental psychologists at the University of Magdeburg, and that means that as environmental psychologists, we are focusing on the interaction of environments and people. So we have a closer look on how does the environment have an impact on people's behavior and well-being, probably, and how do people affect on the environment that's around them. The next slide, please. And to begin with, I would like to introduce you to our Build4People project, which is funded by the Federal Ministry of Research and Education and focuses on Phnom Penh. And after my overview, my colleague Annalena Becker will continue with a kind more specific insights into our environmental psychological perspective. And today's webinar, as we already have learned, is part of a series of seminars that our Build4People project has been running in cooperation with the Center of Khmer Studies. And therefore, I guess it could be a good idea to briefly explain a little bit about the background and main objectives of our Build4People project. Next, please. And our project called Build4People is a transdisciplinary project, and we have a fairly large consortium that includes the German universities of Hamburg, our university in Magdeburg, in Eberswalde, and also in Lübeck, and two companies, Eble Messerschmitt and INEC, and also a number of dissemination and implementation partners, and also research partners in Phnom Penh. So all of our work packages have a cooperation research partner, and our research partner in work package 1 is the Royal University of Phnom Penh and our colleagues Dr. Soksuray and Dr. Obwana. And the total funding period of this project is 6 years with an option for further 2 years. And that means that we have a relatively long time together in Phnom Penh to do research and hopefully to make a significant contribution there. The overall project is being carried out by 7 work packages from different disciplines, and work package 7 is our project coordination, and that is Dr. Weibel from Hamburg, who is the coordinator of the whole project. And we have disciplines dealing with behavior change, sustainable buildings, sustainable neighborhoods, urban green, urban climate, and also sustainable urban transformation. And what you see on this slide here is that the project is also embedded in a bigger kind of a funding line. And what brings all our disciplines and work packages and Build4People together is the goal of enhancing the quality of life through sustainable urban transformation in Cambodia by a people-led, cross-cutting and disciplinary approach. And as already mentioned, the Build4People project aims at improving the quality of life in Cambodia by sustainable urban transformation. And this transformation is, of course, not only a technological challenge, it is also a question of social, of cultural, of economic, and of political transformation. And from our point of view, transformation also means time for change, and that is also the name, a little bit the subtitle of our becoming a subtitle of our work package, behavior change. And this time for change requires also behavioral changes from all of us, and that is why we as environmental psychologists looking for a theory and data-driven way to support behavior change in Phnom Penh. And that this is on the one hand side a big challenge and also great opportunity, and to figure out options how to support and how to trigger a more sustainable lifestyle and more sustainable behaviors in Phnom Penh. And I will now hand over to my colleague Annalena, and she will tell you a little bit more about our environmental psychological perspective in this work package one within our Build4People project. So Annalena, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anke, and John Repsua, good afternoon also from my side. Thank you for joining. Also, thank you for the organizations and our co-speakers for accepting our invitation to discuss with us today. So, as Anke already mentioned, so our role in the Build4People project is the psychological perspective. So we consider the people in this urban transformation and in what's the role also of people in sustainable urban environments. And as Anke already mentioned, a bit more about what's environmental psychology about. So we have these interactions, and then on the one side, we ask the question, how do environments actually influence people's well-being, and what do places mean for people? How can they contribute to good experience, to that people feel well somewhere? And then also, of course, are there certain environments that inspire or initiate certain behaviors? And when we talk about behaviors and also this other direction of the interaction from the influence of people and people's behavior on the environment, we ask the question, what are important behaviors that are sustainably relevant? And in this regard, we the environmental psychological perspectives looks at the impact and the intent of certain behaviors. So among all the behaviors that people can choose in their lifestyle, there are certain behaviors that are more important or also more harmful for the environment. So our goal is to find out what are the environmental friendly behaviors in the context of Phnom Penh, and what is actually determining these behaviors. So as Anke already mentioned, that we are lucky to have a long time with this project. In the first phase of the project, we already tried to figure out, with the help of our surveys and the exchange with local colleagues and practitioners, to find out more about the behavioral context and what behaviors are actually relevant as sustainable behaviors, like looking at the energy consumption and recycling behavior and consumption behavior, and of course also the mobility behavior. How do people move within the city of Phnom Penh? What options do they have, and what options do they choose that might not be too friendly for the environment? And then once we know a little bit more about what influences behavior, then it would be our question, of course, how can we trigger behavior change towards more environmental friendly behavior? And for this, I would like to introduce a little bit more about the psychological theories about behavior. There is this one theory that Samuel will also allude to later in his talk, the so-called value, belief, norm theory. So at first, we consider that people have certain values and motives in their life, like priorities they have. For example, is the biospheric value is something that shows that if people are actually, if they are concerned about environmental issues. And then, we would also look at the cognitive parts, like beliefs about the environment, and also the beliefs about the own behavior, and if people are aware of the consequences of their behavior, like if they are aware of how their behavior contributes to climate change or environmental problems also, and if they then also ascribe responsibility for themselves. And these determinants are also influencing the so-called norms. So do I feel some kind of obligation to act pro-environmentally? And with all these different factors that influence behaviors, we can try to explain why people show certain kind of behaviors. And in the project at the moment, we look for especially at the private sphere behaviors. And then we would look for each behavioral domain. It's important to consider that every behavior has a certain behavioral context. So even though we measure general attitudes and values of people, we then try to allude this to certain behaviors. And for example, explain more about the values and determinants of, for example, energy saving behavior. And we also could, from the first surveys and investigations we did in the first phase of our project, we also had a look at the awareness of environmental problems. And there, for example, we figured out that the global environmental problems are less salient for people at the moment, and there is a stronger focus on local problems like air pollution or lack of waste management. And also, of course, this is a question of visibility of environmental problems. So many different aspects will also influence if people see this need to change things, and if they would already say it's time for change in a certain concerning a certain environmental problem. And so on the one hand, we have these psychological theories and our methods and investigations to find out more about the psychological determinants of behavior, and then also, of course, how behavior change can be triggered and supported. And what we did in the last, in our last big workshop that some of you also attended, would be our next step with the psychological theories and background and research insights. It would be also, of course, our question, when it's time for change, how can this change be initiated also by certain circumstances or changes in the environment, so that the behavioral context can also change. And so we were gathering with many researchers and practitioners and looking for possible practical implications for behavior change. And just to give you a short insight of these results of this workshop that took place in March 2022 at the Royal University of Phnom Penh. So we looked, for example, at the issue of waste management, and there are some practical implications that were mentioned that would initiate more of pro-environmental friendly behavior. Would be, for example, to have clearer instruction on waste management and recycling, also provide more bins in public spaces. So that would be also something when the environment comes into place again, because it's not only, the behavior is not only coming from the inside, but also, of course, can be inspired or initiated by certain environments. And then there was also the idea, for example, to implement an app that would, where you could report spaces where waste will be collected or when bins are needed. Also, another incentive might be to implement a waste management fee. So that would mean the more waste you produce, the more would you would pay. So these would be examples how behavior change could be supported by different means of environmental design, like how public space is designed, and also, of course, by putting other incentives for certain behaviors. And we also talked about consumption behavior in general, like consuming goods, but also, of course, consuming mobility options. And there was also many different ideas, and some of them were also, for example, to offer more waste separation and recycling options, and of course offer public transportation options, so that behavioral choices would could build on more options, so that people have certain degrees of freedom when they choose a certain behavior in their daily life. And then also not so much on the environmental design side, but also with regulative guidelines to strengthen production systems with recycling, less packaging, for example, and local materials. So that's, of course, also an important aspect, that it's not only the behavior that makes the change, but the circumstances of these behaviors that can also be targeted by other means, next to, of course, changing behaviors. So that was a short insight from what we look at, what we try to figure out within our research, and also, of course, how to put it into practice. Of course, with a lot of help from our local colleagues and local researchers and practitioners. So thank you very much for joining, and we are curious about your questions later. And now we are looking forward to learn more about another also environmental psychological approach with the focus on the city of Singapore by our colleague Samuel.
Thank you, Elena and Anka, for your comprehensive project backgrounds on behavior change. And also thank you for your insights discussion on the behavior lifestyle that's completely linked to the consumptions, tire consumption, and also the issue of waste management. That is considered one of the key area that can play a key role in the sustainable of urban consumption. And the next speaker, I wish to invite Dr. Samedy Soung. And Samedy Soung, he will provide insights case study from Singapore, linking to the transportation sector with in Singapore. Please, the floor is with you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation this afternoon to join this webinar. So I'll do a brief introduction of myself. I'm Samedy Soung. I'm from the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative Cities, which is a research institution within the Singapore University of Technology and Design. So while the university is very much our engineering and even an architectural university, our center is an interdisciplinary center built on social science. And we look at critical issues of cities and urbanization using an integrated lens of technology, design, and policy. A lot of our work is very much applied and geared towards creating impact and policy changes. So within the center, I lead the Urban Psychology Lab, where we focus on the behavioral science aspect of urban research, particularly in the intersections of mobility, sustainability, and health, because frankly, when we look at the city and we look at these issues, they're all actually interlinked and intertwined. So today's talk will focus on mobility within cities in the context of dense environment. and the role of psychology in the urban design systems and also the policies. And particularly, we'll be looking at the case of Singapore's journey, or rather, I call it a journey because we are not there yet. We're a long way from achieving sustainable mobility, but research has a big role to play in this. So I hope to share some of this and the work that we are doing here in Singapore. So let's begin by looking at individual mobility decisions, because this is, after all, the cornerstone of the topic of interest today, which is especially from a psychologist's perspective, right? When we talk about time for change, we talk about behavior change, we talk about environmental psychology, we need to look at individual decision making. So when I first started working in this area of mobility, I wanted to understand how individuals make mobility-related decisions. And when we look at the academic literature, it's full of different theories, different hypotheses of why and how people make all these decisions, whether to use a car, whether to take public transport, whether to cycle to work, or whether to even fly. So in a systematic review that we did a few years back, we found that in the literature, there were about 15 different theories and models that have been applied over the years, right, over 30 years, to try to explain specifically car use decisions. And some of these theories, for those who have a background in psychology, you will be quite familiar with them. For example, the theory of planned behavior, norm activation model, value belief norm theory, which we have just heard a presentation on. And because they're all widely used to explain or to understand some behavioral phenomenon, as we've seen in the presentation earlier. So each theory actually tells us a different part of the story of why individuals make their mobility-related decisions. So as opposed to Anker's and Elena works, where they looked at a range of behaviors, when I looked at car use decisions specifically, then I start seeing that there are a lot of similarities and overlaps in the theories and also the studies that were conducted. So this resulted in an idea in the early days that perhaps we could try to integrate some of these theories and findings into an integrative conceptual framework to allow us to have a visual overview of how complicated the decision-making process of individuals is. So this is what we ended up with, the outcome of the exercise. So we integrated as much as possible, right, from each theory, each model that we have identified, and also to look at all the relationships that were reported in all these studies that have been done in 30 years. And we also noted down the level of evidence within this framework itself. So without going into too much technical details, yeah, I think when we look at this framework over here, it's fairly easy to infer and come to the conclusion that the decision-making process of individuals when it comes to mobility decisions is indeed very complex. And what we tried over here is to just list down the psychological components within the framework itself to reflect the complexity of the decision-making and to summarize the different mechanisms or potential mechanisms of change and the level of evidence supporting each of these mechanisms. And by so doing, we can clearly see where and what to do when we want to intervene to change behaviors, and also know what might be the expected outcomes. So by looking at this, we can then actually identify where we can try to intervene and what kind of intervention we would like to put in place. So over here, I put in two opportunities for urban planning and design to intervene, where we look at what are the objective constraints that stop people from going through their intentions and translating their intentions into behaviors. And also, how can we design an environment that facilitates the breaking of habits? So these are opportunities in which we can intervene. And so the next part of my presentation, with this as the theoretical foundation, we want to understand Singapore's journey towards sustainable mobility, and I'll tie both parts back together again. So we want to look at Singapore's journey and why has it worked, but also the unanticipated consequences of what has been put in place in Singapore. So just very brief, I'll attempt to summarize the context of Singapore's mobility landscape. So Singapore, it's an island city-state, so we're quite small, geographically speaking, and it comprises of one main island and many other smaller islands that are not inhabited. So we have a population of about 5.5 million people and have the third highest population density in the world with about 7,800 people per square kilometer, or about 20,000 people per square mile. And our total land area is only about 733 kilometers square. And the city was planned and is designed to be public transport centric. And in this centricity, we have a network that is made up of mass rapid transit lines, shown in the diagram over here, that tries to connect all towns across the island. And this network is supplemented by the light rapid transit lines and also buses for better first and last mile connectivity. There is an ambition to have a train station or what we call an MRT station within 10 minutes walking distance from any residence in Singapore. This is to enhance or to create public transport as a very attractive mobility option. And complementing it is the very strong ambition for the city to be car light and its vision for its residents to prioritize walking, cycling, and riding the public transport rather than to drive. And this is hopefully enabled by an inclusive transport system that caters to the needs of different population segments. And to further enhance it, public transport is made affordable through government subsidies and the different charging frameworks that are put in place. And collectively, this actually leads to a positive attitude and a very strong social norm of using public transport in Singapore. So the current peak hour mode share is about 67%. This stat is not the most updated because it is only released every few years. But we are on track to increase to 75% mode share by 2030. So in comparison to other cities, this is a huge proportion of your population taking public transport. And we can see on the chart on the bottom right, so even as other cities have struggled to maintain public transport ridership following the pandemic, right? Some people have gone on to bicycles, some have preferred the safety of their own cars. So our mobility data suggests that by the start of 2021, with the relaxation of safety measures, public transport ridership has actually rebounded and stayed at a higher level than pre-COVID times. So we see public transport ridership is really the bedrock of the transport network here. Yeah, of course, having an affordable and accessible public transport is clearly not enough. So we also have private vehicle ownership that is very costly and comes at a premium, especially in a land-scarce city where roads are already accounting up to 12% of our land cover. So that's a sizable amount of land that we've given for the construction of roads. And we also have a 0% vehicle population growth policy to ensure that we are not adding more vehicles than the city can sustain. And this policy is revised from time to time, and it might even go negative to reduce the vehicle population in Singapore, who knows, right? And in addition to it, to make vehicle ownership even more onerous, there are different economic measures that are put in place to deter private vehicle ownership. So the main one is the introduction of the certificate of entitlement that was done a couple of decades back. So it is a quota licensing system where any prospective car owner would have to bid for the right to own and to drive a vehicle for 10 years. So any certificate only allows you ownership for 10 years. And as you can see from the chart over here, it's historic data for the last 20 years. And you can see that the demand for this vehicle ownership certificates, they are in red, and they far outstrip the number of certificates that are available, which is the bar in blue. And in recent months, just a couple of days ago also, the price of the certificates for larger cars, so anything above 1,600 cc's, actually breached the 100,000 ceiling. So this 100,000 Singapore dollars for a piece of paper in order to own the car, excluding the price of the car, the tax that goes with it, and all the other associated expenses. And so it makes vehicle ownership really something not trivial. Okay. So in addition to making car ownership costly and to deter people from it, there are also other measures, for example, reduction in parking provision in new developments in the city to surely but slowly nudge people away from using their private vehicles, because it might be more difficult to even park your vehicle if you drive, and to nudge them towards using public transport, which is rapidly being enhanced and expanded. And the last one, there is also an electronic road pricing system that is put in place to curb the usage of the vehicle. So this is also known as congestion charging in other cities. So we see in the image on the top right, you see all the gantries that are located within the city center area. So really, if people are using it on a weekday during office hour, you would have to pay extra in order to use certain roads. And all these gantries are quite large, and every vehicle is charged a varying amount of money in order to use the road. The image of the gantry is on the bottom right of the screen. Okay. So collectively, all these measures have led to a very low vehicle ownership, and the number is about 11% in Singapore. This is a relatively small number compared to 80% in the United States and 50% in Europe. And together, it has also led to the strong ridership of public transport, which is considerably a more sustainable mobility option compared to driving your own car or even your motorbike. However, what this has resulted in is the unintended consequence of making private vehicle ownership, as when we talk about this ownership, especially cars, to take on a very important and symbolic role in the society over here. So when we think of cars in US or in Europe, it's really to get from point A to B, to travel long distance, but cars in Singapore are not for utility. Okay? It's not for getting from point A to B. Rather, cars seem to be an extension of one's identity, an expression of who you are, your socioeconomic status, and it is also embedded within the citizen's aspiration. Okay, so we have this common phrase that you have to aim for the 4 or the 5 C's in your life. So you have a condominium, you have a credit card, and you have a country club membership. The other one is you need to own a car in order to show that you have made it, or you have attained a certain status in your life. So many young people today, in the new generation, even though they are more environmentally aware, or they would want to be more sustainable in their practices, many of them aspire to own a car, and not one that is more environmentally friendly. Because remember, this is a statement purchase. It's not really for utility. It's not for the environment. Okay? It may, with Tesla and quite nice, fancy, high-end electric vehicles coming into the market, it may be coincidentally electric or even hybrid. But the key thing over here is people don't make their mobility decisions based on the environment, because cars are a luxury good over here. So the whole decision-making process has changed. So what is worrying is also our research shows that once people own a car or have ready access to a car, it makes public transport a lot more unlikely. So people with a car, if you're paying 100, 200,000 for a car, why park it at home and pay 98 cents to take a public transport? The economics just don't work out. So since they have purchased an expensive car, they would use it. So this is the dilemma that we're facing over here in Singapore. So this is where we are in Singapore's journey towards sustainable mobility. So this is today's situation. Okay, we have increasing demand for private vehicle ownership, even though it's getting more expensive to own a private vehicle. And remember, our public transport mode share at 75% is already peaking. How much more can we go? It's unrealistic to say we have 90% or even 100% of the population taking public transport. So how much more can we go from here? And this leads to tomorrow's predicament. What else can we do to be more car light? What more can we do to change people's mobility decisions and behaviors? So in my last slide, I will just list down certain things that are being done or being planned at the city level, and also add on a very short commentary of mine on my personal thoughts on them. So what is being done here? The creation of car light precincts, which are designated regions within the city that will go car light, which means that there will be initiatives to improve the infrastructure, to nudge people towards walking, cycling, or riding public transport instead of using their car. And there is also a creation of a car-free town that will be named Tengah Park District, which is currently under development. And the images you see on the right, these two images are actually artists' impression of how this car-free town would actually look like. And you can see from these two images that public transport and active mobility are prioritized over here to get alongside, green space and a more hopefully improved living standard. And all these are public housing estates. And further, there are also plans and trials that are underway in the last decade or so to introduce autonomous vehicles to enhance or further enhance public transport connectivity and accessibility, so that people do not actually have the excuse to say that I do not have access to the public transport network. And of course, it's unlikely that we will shake off our obsession with private vehicle. So there are different initiatives and strategies that have been introduced to encourage the adoption of electric vehicles instead. And this includes the commitment to remove internal combustion engine vehicles by 2040 to have a greener fleet of vehicles within Singapore. So for me, my personal takeaway, the urban design and the planning ambitions are present. You can see these are quite futuristic, but very much achievable within the next few years or next decade or so. But it remains to be seen if this is enough to change people's mobility behavior, to make it more sustainable. And in the larger context of it, to make our population more sustainable in all their practices across all the different domains, not just mobility. So the challenge here, in my perspective, it still remains to be the people. Their values, their attitudes, their beliefs, their normative behaviors, all this need to change, not just the infrastructure, not just the technology. We need to get the people to change and keep up pace with all the other urban design, urban policy changes that are being introduced. And this is where I think we on this panel probably share the common understanding and common aspiration that this is where environmental psychology and the related disciplines that look into the softer side of things, not the technology, not the buildings, but the softer side of things that complement or to make up the whole society, to be part of this discussion. And we should be involved right from the early stages to inform research-driven policy making or design. Okay? So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Samuel Chung. Your presentation is very insightful, very inspiring. So you provide very strong background on theoretical debate and discussion on the plant behavior and the norm activates a model. That's one of the key influence to the decision making in the mobilities. You also provide very good insight in terms of the complexity of the urban mobility within the overpopulated country, and also very good suggestion in the human center in terms of behavior change. So maybe the question we leave for the Q&A session, but to speed up, we can introduce another speakers to continue, and then we offer the floor for the Q&A. So our next speaker is Dr. Pothirat, and he also going to provide another case study from Phnom Penh, very much linked to the sustainable development goal of 11, and also the one example of the small village community, that one of the example in terms of community in terms of behavior change practice. So the floor is now I hand to Dr. Pothirat and to take the next talk, and then we will offer the Q&A, and also thank for Dr. Samuel Ong for the great presentation also. Thank you.
Some group to meet Zoom now. Thank again to Dr. Thuon, our moderator today, and also thank to the Center for Khmer Study and also Build4People project team for organizing this important webinar, and also inviting me as a speaker to speak in this panel. My name is Pothirat. Currently, I'm working as a laureate in Korea. I'm currently in Korea, but I'm visiting Cambodia frequently, as I also have several projects in Cambodia. And my topic today is also related to how I want to present how urban child-friendly initiative influence environmental attitude behavior, as today we talking about environmental psychology. Even I'm not really feel in environmental psychology, but I try to share to link my research to the topic, and also as I'm also a Phnom Penh resident, so maybe I can share a lot more to the expert here. As we already know, the world this day is already urbanized, which means almost 70% of the world population living in urban area, as projected by the United Nations by 2050. Interestingly, almost 90% of this increase taking place in Asia and Africa. Particularly, Southeast Asian region also rapidly urbanizing. That's why we see a lot of problem related to the city this day. And also in this rapidly urbanizing trend, it's like 60% of the world population is are children. That's why my topic also focuses on children. So we see that promoting sustainable environments is significant to improve the quality of life for people, particularly for children across the world. Of course, for Southeast Asian countries, including Cambodia. By children, children is is like recognized as a indicator species. It means if we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for all people. And of course, maybe successful city for adults, maybe not really successful for children. But if we put the children, you know, as the indicator species. At the end, it's successful for everyone. Yeah, and yeah, even the Sustainable Development Goal, they mentioned about the children. Yeah. Of course, yeah, regarding, you know, many aspects, yeah, related to waste management, air quality, and so on, like our previous speaker mentioned. But this one, I would take a look on like a green public space, yeah. While also the one target of the SDG 11, yeah, as we know, is this Sustainable Development Goal for city, yeah, that we know shortly, sustainable city and community, yeah, which is the target 11.7, yeah, which is aimed to provide, you know, safe, inclusive, accessible, green and public spaces, yeah, yeah, particularly for women, children, yeah. And if we look back to our country context, Cambodia, particularly Phnom Penh, by throwing a survey with the expert, we also can see how the urban space, it means we can see indicator here like urban parks, you know, biodiversity garden, or we know a botanic garden, and playgrounds are also the indicator that directly to the children. Even in terms of, you know, the indicator priority, if we compare with social and economic dimension, then maybe it's not really high, because it's the nature of developing country, you know, economic and social development always are seen the priority. But in general, in the framework, still, you know, urban space, green and public space is still important. So if we prioritize in terms of environmental sustainability, so they will play important role dealing with the like waste management and so on. Yeah, so I will talk a little bit influence to like green and public space. In general, we can see in terms of child-friendly initiative for green and public space. It's like if we have it, it's easy to transform, you know, to child-friendly or community initiative. It means we can, you know, have a good like place for them to play or enjoy and so on. And also in terms of like waste, you know, so we can put in children in the like inside in the plan. Also we can see how can impact. Sometimes in the common thinking, like developing country mostly, sometimes adults think it's okay because they can adapt to it. Or sometimes, you know, they have a choice. If they are not happy with this region and so on, they can move and so on. But if we put the children in place, we can feel that, oh, this is not safe for my children, for the children. Even we adapt to it, but it's not okay for children. So it's kind of this initiative, influence, of course, firstly, environmental institute, then environmental behavior. And the interesting thing, as you can see in the figure, when the child-friendly initiative, preserve, the like we can say the place or public water body and so on. It's, you know, not only popular for children, even adults, you see, they came to this area and enjoy it. So that the result came from there. Sometimes we, in developing country, maybe we cannot see how it's important. But when we put the children in, we see it's important for children. And then we can result from it. That's why the theory mentioned. If we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for everyone. And also many studies mentioned regarding how we can build a sustainable city for children or community for children. Maybe in developing country, in developed country or modern country, maybe it's a bit difficult to find what else that children need, because everything already good, you know, for children. So maybe it's okay, you know, it could be like very like workshop or seminar or orientation and so on. But in our city, for example, Phnom Penh, we can see clearly how and what is not friendly with children. Like it's not safe in terms. Sometimes even me, you know, adult, I'm afraid to cross the road because of the stuff. They look back again before crossing the road. So if we look back to the children, so how can we let them, you know, walk outside home but it's not safe in terms of traffic and sanitation, and also many aspects that related to them. Yeah, that's why it's like when we put the children in place, so we can find out like what is not really friendly for our city, and also it's like many aspects that they want. And also the children also can impact the adult directly, or sometimes impact to the plan of the government. As you can see in this figure, yeah, it's like they came to the project. No, don't destroy my tree. Don't destroy my forest. I need it. Don't destroy my river, and so many things. So that can the significant maybe as a normal thinking, maybe develop like market or like modern apartment and so on is much more better, but still it's like it's in the term of nature and like environmental friendly and so on, still it's like not really friendly for children. And if we ask them that they became able, they want their city or community to have like fruit tree, fish, you can play with bird and they're friendly, this kind of thing. Yeah, that's also the reason that the UNICEF focus on child-friendly city and community. Actually, the first mandate of the UNICEF is to realize the right of the child, but by realizing this, impacts or this important, they try to make more focus how can the children play, a role in the city planning and development. Yeah, accordingly, we also Cambodia have developed a child-friendly community framework. Because based on the studies and because most of the population in the community are children. And so they have right, and also we have to provide, because they're also human. They have right to have place to play. This slide is just a verification, is literature review that show that it's like the framework of the UNICEF also need to localize, because it's some not really fit for developing country, for example, Cambodia, in terms of like city structure, community structure, the way of understanding and so on. Yeah, that's why we develop own framework. Therefore, the UNICEF framework, there are 9 building blocks. But Cambodia, we adopt, we localize, we only have 4. And for first, the children health, of course, when we consider about sanitation, waste in community, when we put the children, we can see the community clean, no pollution. So at the end, we can see also adult, enjoy this kind of friendliness. Protection may be not really related to environment, and education, of course, is important. When we train them well in the primary school, then it means they love environment from the bottom of their heart. So when they grow up, even they live in poverty, still they love environment. They know how to protect the waste. Participation is also important aspect that can involve them to all levels that affect them. So now we can come close to a study, so like case study at the Smile Village community, which is located in Dong Cao, Phnom Penh. When we see the name, we can feel how it's friendly. And and here this master plan, and we can see here the playground. It's mean the community can consider several aspects here. And the result is the playground is it's not only popular for children at the end, it's also good for the people, for parents, mostly. It's like Cambodia culture, they like to chit chat. So during weekend and holiday, they came to chit chat while watching their children playing. This community is like it's for underprivileged family, for the poor, which is a result from 3-way partnership of STEP organization responsible for improving livelihood, and PSO is improving education, child education, and HFH is for like developing infrastructure in the community. So we can see here, regarding the, because they live in the poor, if we talk about, environmental behavior or sustainable behavior, so we can simply say how they think about environment or sustainability, while they are living in poverty, while they are, difficult to find food to eat, or while they have, many difficulty regarding the income. So this initiative also show an interesting aspect regarding the income chain. Before the people move to the community, it's like they are not really care about environment, about their health. But when they have like income, it's mean the step organization, it provide handicraft shop to the community. So they came to the community and they work, they get income. And when that income increase, they start caring about their health. They start caring about the environment in the community. They start caring about the children health in the community. So it's like change. They know how it's environment important. So we can simply say the income is also one of the important aspect that influence the environmental attitude and environmental behavior. And education, of course, I mentioned earlier, if we teach the children to love, environment since the beginning, since they were kid children. So when they grow up, even they live in poverty, they still love environment, or they can how to manage environment well. And here the interesting result that came from the child-friendly initiative. The community have a lot of greeneries, also have vegetable garden, widely open in communal space, accessibility, and also safe environment in the community. So we can see, even this aim for children, but at the end, adult also, get to benefit from this kind of thing. And of course, the children here also have well educated, even they are not having actual environmental education curriculum, but still how the community, how the way that they teach the children, and they also have campaign and so on. The children, they can learn, and they love environment. And also it's also important because currently in the formal education system for the primary school, we don't have this kind of environmental curriculum yet. So it also helps in some hand. So I already mentioned about this, and also it's also linked with the literature in the field. This study also mentioned the income and education. Is like it's the most factor influencing the environmental attitude and behavior. And if we look back to the Smile village, so it's of course when they are living in poverty, they not care much about environmental behavior is it's not much. But when they growing, their income will grow. It's like they start loving their health, their children health, their community environment and so on. And education also play important role. As I mentioned earlier a little bit, if it's like the people, they train or teach well about environmental education, environmental management, environmental impacts, how it's serious or how it's important. So when they grow up, it's like they can love the environment even they live in poverty. Interestingly, many studies mention that environmental education is also a key aspect linked to the public participation, because in the city, some project, it's like even the government involve the public, to provide addition and so on. But still, the public, they don't know, what could be, a good environment for them. Sometimes they just know it's impact them, but they don't know how to show. So lack of environmental education also affect to how they provide the idea or solution to the government, to decision maker and so on, even they live in that community. Yeah, because the time is not a law, I cannot explain everything. Yeah, but I hope to receive the a comment and question during the Q&A session. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Puttirat, for very comprehensive presentation and sharing the insight case study on the child-friendly environments related to the urban psychology. And you also bring a very good, interesting on the key factor that makes people start to realize the environments, the issue of income, the issue of poverty, and the issue of education, and also you also link to the concept of environments. When we are talking about the environment, we talk about the participation, and this is another level of participation that we need to discuss also. And before we hand the floor to the audience to ask questions, maybe I can have one question for each of the speaker, and before we allow the question from the audience. So the first question to Anna Lenas. The first question: how can behavior change interventions address a different targets group? And the second one I want to address to Dr. Anke. Are there any certain behavior that should be targeted at first with the highest priorities? So we have a different group of people in urban settings. So this is not the same group. So what are the high priority? And also for Dr. Samuel Jones, you had a very good insight presentation from Singapore case study. The follow-up question for you is what are some of the experience from Singapore that can be applied to other city and country in the regions? And also, yeah, for Puttirat, also for your question is, can you provide a real case of how this factor influence public environmental behaviors and participation in promoting environmental quality and eco-friendly initiatives? Okay, so you can have 1 or 2 minutes respond, and then we can leave the question from the audience. We take from the chat box. Yes.
Yeah, literally, thank you very much for the questions and the introduction. So yeah, what I really like about the question that there are different target groups, because also Anke will go more into the question what behaviors need to be changed, but of course also it's clear that there are many different groups concerning age or income and many different socio-demographic backgrounds. So I also really like the that Puttirat put the focus on the children perspective, and I also saw this question about how can children be heard, and I guess that's a very good point, that we need to consider that everyone has a different behavioral context. So which means first of all, I have a different kind of I experience maybe a different kind of autonomy in my decisions that I have when I choose behavior. Of course, people have different purchasing powers, so some options might be not possible, even if they are the more pro-environmental options. And then, of course, yeah, there's this different scope for decision making, which leads to different degrees of freedom. And then, of course, we also see that people have their different relevant peer groups. Of course, then when we think of social norms and when we have our role models, we look at how others behave, and then of course we need to consider that people look at different peer groups, and so in these peer groups they might also share different values and social norms. So that's very important actually to to tailor these behavior change interventions, and taking into account that the target groups have their different behavioral contexts and of course living circumstances too.
Thank you. So how about Dr. Anke?
Yeah, thank you. So when talking about what would be the most important behaviors to trigger or how to make a decision, so it's more strategic thing, I guess, because you, on the one hand side, you could go for the high impact behaviors first. And if you look for a situation in Cambodia, for instance, maybe that would be on the one hand side, the building sector, because buildings have a really high impact, and on the other hand, probably mobility behavior. So if you go for this direction, you should affect these behaviors first, because they are really high impact behaviors. On the one hand side, especially from a psychological perspective, it's also important to keep in mind what are the behaviors that are most important for the people living in Cambodia. So we have already learned that waste management and plastic consumption and stuff like that is very visible for the people, and they think it's very important. It does not make that much impact on a global point of view, but if you look at these behaviors, I think it's important to address these behaviors, because then you reach the people, and you need the people to be activated and think it's a positive way to go. And that will make maybe we can hope for so-called spillover effects. So if you try to change, if you give knowledge, and if you show people the relevance of their individual behaviors on the situation around them, and if you look for changing attitudes and norms, it's, on the one hand side, it's something for the long run. So it's more a marathon to go. It's not a short-term effect, but it's very important on the long hand, because you can hope that changing behaviors in one sector will have something like a spillover for other sectors later on. And that, yeah, I think that is an important way to go. So in short, I think we have to focus on both. So the impact, we have to keep in mind the impact, and we really have to go for the high impact sectors. And maybe this is more something for regulations and infrastructure and stuff like that. But we also have to focus on behaviors that are important for the people living in a specific city, like Phnom Penh, for instance.
Okay, thank you. Very insight answer. And also, Dr. Samuel Jones, please.
Maybe I can add on to Inka's point.
Yes.
To share Singapore, right? I think even globally, there was a point in time, a couple of years back, where we were all against plastic straws, right? Not that plastic straws will make a huge impact in terms of climate action or climate change, but it was something that was so easy for people to do, to reject. You know, if you go to one of your cafes, you just reject the straw and you drink from the mug or from the cup, right? It was something easy to do, yet, you know, it led to people's higher awareness, understanding, oh, like why are everyone around me starting to reject straws and so on. And then it slowly moved on, at least in Singapore, to cutleries that you bring around, and then, you know, reusable bags and so on. There were behaviors that people could latch onto, and hopefully creates a positive spillover effect to other domains to increase the awareness. So I thought that was just something I wanted to add on to that. At least in Singapore, we haven't figured that out. We're not very good. Plastic consumption is still pretty high, especially with the plastic bags. Yeah. So back to the question that was posed, what are some experience from the Singapore's sharing, right, that can be probably used in other cities or other countries? I think this is probably a question that comes up very often, and it also came up in the Q&A, because Singapore, it's an island state. It is in a different developmental stage, its population has different interests, different level of education, different level of income, and so on and so forth, which we know are important for creating behavior change in terms of sustainable living. But what can be translated or what can be applied for other cities or for other countries, it's the lessons and the mistakes that we have made. Actually, when Singapore embarked on its journey, we looked at what other cities were doing. So in this case, we haven't clearly got it all correct. Like I alluded to in the presentation earlier, that by making car ownership more expensive, it actually created a different type of challenge, right? So it's about understanding from the lessons that we have. So I think maybe some of the key lessons have been integrated planning and very much evidence-based, research-based planning. And when we talk about integrated, it's also about a whole of government approach, different ministries, different levels of decision-making, and different stakeholders coming together and working, at least we are from academia, so working with the academic community also to strengthen any development. And also with our work, especially my work with autonomous vehicle, then I see the opportunity at least for countries who are embarking on certain change to actually use Singapore as a kind of a playbook to see how you can leapfrog with the technology, right? You don't have to go to ICEs before you go to electric, which is our problem now. We can't move from ICEs to electric fast enough. Why not just start building the infrastructure for electric and start early in terms of when people are moving from their two-wheelers to four-wheelers, already get them electric. Then you will be in 5 years, 10 years time far ahead of where Singapore would be. And this is learning from the Singapore's experience. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think it's time to pick up the question from the Q&As, and maybe yes, I will give back to you the question. So, like the first question, maybe we can address to Potterat. We have here Emily Drop. Emily Drop, she asked, I don't know he or she, but how can children, a point of view, be integrated in city planning in Phnom Penh or in Cambodia, given the traditional behavior of youth listening to the older generation, generally allowing themselves little to no comment or criticism or how things are done. That is I think very norm-based approach. And the second question also from to Potterat also, how can children idea really be integrated in the design of space for them, especially younger children? Are these children in school, in class, or during special activity by teacher or by parents? So Potterat, can you elaborate with this question, like a two question? You can provide one answer. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thuon, and also saying to the audience for the question. Yeah, it's also a very good question. Yeah, when we like, how can we regard the opinion or point of view from the children, yeah, integrate it into the planning. Yeah, firstly, if we look back in terms of the regulation, yeah, or like framework, we also have the, like I showed earlier about the child-friendly initiative, yeah, which is developed by National Council for Children, yeah. So this council, yeah, under the Ministry of Social Affairs, also play important role, like dealing with the children. So yeah, by how can we, collect the opinion from the children? Of course, when we talk about the older children or the parent, if we, expect the parent, to gather like the point of view from the children, yeah, maybe, yeah, it's not easy to get that, because usually the children, they are afraid of provide something like the question mentioned is like the traditional behavior of the people to the children, ask them to do this, ask them to do that, not do this, not do that. But based on the international experience, they have a lot of way how to get the point of view from the children. Like I show in the slide, one figure show allow the children, the teacher, or for example, if you want to do a project and you make a seminar and so on, invite children to come and then let them draw, or maybe draw is better for the small children. But for the older children, maybe from 10 to 16, maybe they can speak. But for if you target the small, it's better to allow them to draw what they want their their series to be. What they want, what kind of series. So you see that image they draw. They want series have friendly with bird, have river, fish, fruit tree, and so on. So that also one that we can gather the input from the children. And maybe other way, but the time is not allowed. But sometimes we also can see this day, if we compare with the low income and the high income or middle income and so on, we can see clearly, because in Cambodia we have a lot of gated community, for example, Borei Ping Hut Bang Snao and so on. So the children who live there, they have well educated, and also they're very brave compared to the poor. They can speak what they want. So it's also better to have a seminar or workshop with them. They can speak what they want, but mostly they speak in English, because yesterday the children they're fluent in there. So they can see how it's important. They live in Borei Ping Hut Bang Snao. They have a lot of playground, river, park, lot of things. So if we bring them to the city center, there's no playground. The traffic is so crazy. They cannot play along the road. So they also can raise their concern directly to us if we want to gather from. I think I can address those questions.
Okay. Thank you, Patriot. You give very good answer. Somehow the answer also linked to the social class and social economic background of the family or the children also. And another question maybe to our colleague from the Build4People, from Sumaira Kusit. Thank very much for the informative presentation. I want to know that is there any possible to join the project? I am highly interested in environmental psychology and want to collaborate science. So maybe this type of question like seek for collaboration, and it may be possible from either Dr. Ankes or Annalena's. Please, can you respond to one of our audience? And then I will floor back to Dr. Samuel, since there are some questions for him. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for your interest. That's great. And I already responded in the question and answer and wrote my email address. So we are very happy. And if you could just send me an email, and I will come back to you, and we can figure out how we could collaborate and exchange a little bit on environmental psychology. And you can, of course, visit our website as well, the Build4People website, because you will find a lot of already a lot of information about the project and also about our work package. But we stay in contact. Great.
A couple more questions. I think we can address Samuel also. The question from Emily Trump. The question here, like Singapore example on transportation, is very interesting, but seem quite unique. Iceland states, well-developed middle class, a state with a strong capacity of both policy making and enforcement. How can this example be used for city in Southeast Asia? So that is one of the questions. I think. Okay. So yes, Samuel, maybe you can respond to this question also.
I think in the previous question, I tried to answer this also. Maybe I can just add on to this is within the ASEAN region, right? Specifically because Q&A question was mentioning Southeast Asia region. Within ASEAN region, I think we share a lot of commonalities also. So it might be interesting, and I know that there are already initiatives between the governments and so on to actually exchange capabilities to actually go into joint programs or ventures or projects to strengthen the capacity. So maybe that might be something to explore. And I think even on the research front, having something that accounts or to look into the cultural or the contextual differences in the Southeast Asian region might also be useful. And this will, in the long run, actually help with translation of some of the lessons from other cities or countries, and also from the literature, right, into the local context. So I think the capability in this region can come together to be boosted. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we are now almost on our session. I wonder we need to take more questions, but it would be best we want each speaker to provide a key message to the audience, like 1 minute each, and then we can conclude our session today. Is it okay? Yeah, 1 minute each.
To start?
You can go first. Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
Okay, thank you so very much. So first of all, thanks to all of you for the inspiring discussions, and yeah, that was really great. And maybe my last statement is a double statement. So on the one hand, I guess, especially from a perspective as being an environmental psychologist, it's for me, it's very important to keep in mind that we have to focus on both sides. On the one hand side, to change attitudes and norms and values to support behavior change, and on the one hand to also look at the most important infrastructural barriers and constraints, and to figure out what also from a psychological perspective, to figure out what makes it easier or difficult to change behaviors, and to together with the people in the specific context to figure out how to make behaviors easier. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And Annalenas, what are your last message through this session?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'm very happy about the discussions, and I would say my statement is a little bit also alluding to our joint webinar, how we put perspectives together. So I think it's very important to always have in mind that there are so many factors playing together when it comes to change, that we also need patience and many different solutions. And also, I guess it's important to see also now when we talked about the children perspective, that of course it needs time and also willingness to maybe let go of things that have been established so far, and yeah, make room for new options, and also of course for new perspectives. And I guess that's also important when we think of our professions, that we need the technological side, we need to understand the social parts of it, and yeah, I think this is a very important part of the change, that it requires a kind of openness and in the inclusion of many different perspectives and possibilities.
Okay, thank you. And Samuel Chung, what is your last concluding message?
Yeah, I think from all the presentations and even the Q&A and discussions, I think we can come to the conclusion that we are operating, especially in this region in Cambodia, in a very rapidly developing economy, which means that societal expectations, aspirations are growing, and it will become more and more challenging to try to balance out, right? The desire from people to have a better life, at the same time, balancing out the need for more sustainable lifestyle. Sometimes it comes and it conflicts. So how do we help people to de-conflict, right? And do not have to sacrifice one for the other.
Okay, very insightful. And Dr. Potirot, your final concluding remarks, and yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, I have talked a lot about how can link with the children. But firstly, maybe my recommendation to the publics. Sometimes maybe some issue you are difficult, to think whether it's tough or not. So firstly, put your children first. So you can think simply, it is safe for my children or not. In terms of sanitation, in terms of how you manage your waste and so on. And also, if I mentioned a lot regarding the education, environmental education, because it's also a play important role, and also we can see it how it linked to every sector, and also it's also the foundation that can be achieved in the long run. And this day we see the gap in the formal education. We see firstly, even the curriculum also include earth science and environment together, but it's only just the introduction, not really a practice and in deep in what is the challenge and what is the significant and how its impact, and so on. So especially the curriculum only cover from secondary to the high school, not the primary school. So it's better to include the environmental curriculum in the primary schools as well, because as I mentioned earlier, it's impact everything. It's like if even firstly in environmental behavior, it's also impact from the education, and then even their participation. If we don't know what is environment and what is sustainability and so on, so how can they participate? And sometimes even the project impact them directly in the community, but they don't know how to provide a message or their voice, the planning. So even it's take time for the government, but it's the time to change, to include those kind of things. And also based on the Korea experience, it's like in 1980s, in 1990s also they faced this kind of problem. Firstly, the government not allow the public involved in the what we call it's like the decision-making process. But after that, the government revised the law and allow the public to involve. But at the end, the public cannot say something because they don't have knowledge of environment. So they cannot provide message or anything to the government, even those projects affect them in the community. That we can see how environmental education is important. Yes, that's all.
Thank you very much. I think we are now come to the concluding session. First of all, I would like to thank all the four speakers. And today we brought up a very important topics. Mostly we can say like environmental, human environment relations. It is very important that how people can adapt themselves within the complex environments and the changing environments. And in the urban area, it's very much rapidly growing in Cambodia, and so many change has changed. I think over the past decade, there's a lot of issue conflicting over land use change, and now we bring another key adaptive strategy on environmental psychology and human adaptations. So how these people adapt to the change. And I think before we conclude, I also would like to thank you all again and all the participants that pay attention to participating and posting the question. And also I would like to thank Samedy. She also one of the key player in Center Khmer Study, play behind the scene, and also another colleague Song Hee. He also very quiet in playing the facilitating us mostly on the technical side. And so I think we can conclude our session today, and also thank for you all and also the participants. Yes.